You are listening to the Two and Out CFL podcast, a proud member of the Canadian Football Podcast Network.
I'm Travis Currah with Sheldon Jones as we have got to the end of week 10 of the 2024 CFL season. And hey, we are the newest members of the 500 subscriber club on YouTube. So thank you so much for getting us there. You can join the club as well. Just search Two and Out on YouTube, subscribe there, and keep raising those numbers. We've got a pretty cool community going on there, and a lot of engagement with the show as well. And you can send in questions at twoandout.ca to our mailbag. Sheldon, we'll just start with this. We were kind of talking about EA and Madden and that kind of thing last show. So we got an email from some guy. That's what it says his name is. He says, I think you got a few things wrong about EA in the football games. I work for EA. I'm not allowed to speak publicly about anything EA related other than the publicly available info. What I will say is that EA is an American company, always has been. They're based in Redwood City, California. They have offices in Vancouver, the Canadian epicenter of EA, in Alberta, Ontario, and Quebec, and are in something like 20 countries overall with around 15,000 employees. Just FYI, great show. I listen twice a week during the season when you do have 2 episodes a week, and this some guy is in Alberta. Hey, we do appreciate that email. We got another interesting email that we'll get to later in the show, but Sheldon, to say the least, an eventful week 10, eh?
Very eventful, and some guy. Let's get to work on getting that CFL game. Come on.
Yeah. Make it happen, man. Make it happen. We will start our week 10 recap talking about a tie game. The first one since 2017, which actually was in Ottawa, by the way, against Calgary. But this one, a 22-22 tie between the Riders and the REDBLACKS. Now, the game was 13-13 going to overtime. So thankfully there was overtime to get a little bit more points on the board here. But mistakes galore. For a low-scoring game like this, I'm surprised that it was actually quite entertaining. But when you get one team that blocks 2 field goals like the Riders did, and then, like, the REDBLACKS had all these opportunities as well. There was a point in the first half when Devontae Dedmon has a nice return, and he would have probably had the REDBLACKS starting on the 20 while he fumbles the ball. So Sask takes over. So a lot of opportunities with Ottawa knocking on the door, having their kicks blocked, or turning the ball over. It actually wasn't long after that when the Riders were kind of in their own end zone. And this game, there was so much going on in this game because after the fumbled punt, Sask ends up gaining a little bit of field position back. They punted back. Ottawa takes a holding penalty, so they do start in their own end. But this game from the start, there was a lot of messes going on.
Yeah, there's a lot of messes. There's drops. There was overthrows. There was man center, and we'll get to that at the end. It was. I wouldn't say it was a good game. I would say, like, if you watch just the last 10 minutes of the fourth and overtime, then yeah, I guess there was some entertaining stuff there. But just, you know what, it was just weird because I was watching that game, and as a Rider fan, I was expecting to lose that game just because of Ottawa. Like, Drew Brown was playing good. Sorry to all the Red Black fans, because I had Drew Brown as my quarterback in fantasy, and that's the second week in a row that my quarterback in fantasy has gotten hurt. So I'll be taking considerations as to who to have this week. So you guys hit me up.
Let's talk about
You're 3
fantasy.
weeks in a row. You're 3 weeks in a row.
Yeah, I'm 3 weeks in a row. I had Trey Ford this week. I had Geno Lewis, whose 77 games with a catch streak came to an end. I had Tyson Philpott, who also got hurt. I had Khalil Pimpleton, who had, 2 catches? Like, I
I
really
had like 50 some points.
I don't say this, but I really just feel like quitting. It's been one of those years, man.
Yeah, well, good thing you're not in a league, I guess, like I am, that has our name on it. Yeah, it's just, I don't know. Like, I thought that it was going to be a completely different game. I didn't think that Drew Brown was going to get hurt.
Yeah.
I saw some very few, but I saw some people trying to say that again, Saskatchewan was dirty for injuring an Ottawa quarterback, which there's nothing dirty about the hits. Either of the hits that went low, they just were reaction. They were just, how you come off a block, or in the case in the overtime, they're getting cut block.
No, I thought the Miles Brown one. I just thought he was a bit reckless.
It looked like he was trying not to do the damage. Like at the end,
I don't
like
think it was intentional.
No. Like he was trying to get to the quarterback quick, and he shucked his block, and he kind of fell over. But again, it's not like somebody dove specifically at somebody's shins and then said whatever. I'm not even going to talk about Marino. So it wasn't the same situation there. But and it probably would have been a completely different game had Drew Brown not got hurt, because I think that led to the Riders being able to stay in it a little bit more, because I think other than a few runs by Crum, the Riders defense kind of held him okay. But I don't know. I felt the whole game like we were going to lose, and then it was tied, and then tied again, and then overtime, and then all that BS happened. I just felt like crap the whole rest of the weekend. I didn't like the way the game ended. I didn't like tying in general. I hate tying. It's worse than a loss, in my opinion. But, how often can you tie a game and then move up in the standings?
Yeah,
that's what happened.
It was pretty weird. I guess the drive where I mentioned Sask starting in their own end was the punt to Dedman, and then the fumble, and then later in the half, Shea Patterson throws an interception to Jovan Santos Knox. You'd think Ottawa's going to get on the board. Well, that field goal was blocked. Actually, it ended up being 3-3 at the end of the first half, but a lot of things were going on in this one. And then we get to the end of the game, and the first touchdown wasn't scored by the Riders until there was a minute 57 left in the game. But still, obviously, lots was to happen, because on the next drive, Roland Milligan picks off Dustin Crum on a 2nd and 16. So the Riders kick the go-ahead field goal. Ottawa gets the ball back with about 40 seconds to go. And they tie the game at 13 to send this thing to overtime. And I guess that's when the excitement really starts. All of a sudden, the offenses are working. Sheldon, like Dustin Crum, takes them with a big completion to Dominic Rhymes. He runs the ball in. Some terrible tackling displayed by the Riders. And the REDBLACKS take the lead. Of course, in overtime, you were supposed to go for 2 points. You have to go for 2 points. They fail. Well, Saskatchewan, on a 3rd and 4, throws an incomplete pass to Sean Bain Jr. To me, it looked like all right defense from Elijah McGee. Now, he had an interception earlier in the game. It gets challenged, or was it an automatic review?
It was challenged.
It was a challenge. And
that's important. That is important when it comes to my rant later.
Now, yeah. It's found when you slow it down frame by frame, 30 frames a second or whatever they film it at. Yeah, he was there 1/100th of a second before the ball was there. So they throw the pass interference. That extends Saskatchewan's overtime drive, and they get the touchdown. An opportunity to win, but nope. They can't convert the 2-point either. Sask goes again. They kick a field goal. Ottawa ball. Oh. Now there's 2nd and 22. Dustin Crum gets sacked, fumbles the ball, and the command... Well, let's face it, everybody's on the field.
Game's over.
Yeah, they're celebrating. The players are shaking hands. The fans in Ottawa, they allow fans on the field after the game, and they're already at field level, which maybe they're going to have to adjust that, allowing them on the field as soon as the game is over, because there was an incident where I guess some guy was chirping Bob Dice, and Bob Dice had to be held back. He said that he had some inappropriate things to say. I don't know what that means, but he said, I'm not going to allow people to talk to my players like that or him like that. But then the command center comes down and initiates a ruling, and they decide it's roughing the passer, resuming the game, Sheldon.
So another key thing to say is that the play before this happened, I believe Bob Dice challenged for pass interference. He challenged for something because he threw that challenge flag aggressively, because that's important, because he lost the challenge. So that means he did not have another challenge. So this play became a turnover, and all turnovers are reviewed automatically, or at least they're supposed to be. We've seen instances where even just a game previously, no, 2 games previously in Montreal, Mario Alford supposedly fumbled a ball, and it was not a fumble, but it didn't seem like they reviewed it, because if they would have reviewed it, it should have been changed. However, so now that they review this and they can see it's pass interference, because, and it wasn't the, they gave the penalty to somebody different. They gave the penalty to Carney, but it was somebody else, number 57, who got actually cut blocked and fell into Dustin Crum's legs. Now, in the rule book, it states that any, like, I'm paraphrasing here, but it has to be like an intent to hit the legs. There was no intent there. He got cut blocked. Now, this is, in my opinion, this shouldn't even happen. The game should have been over when the Riders didn't catch the ball. But if you're going to review for a fumble, review for the fumble. There's been multiple other circumstances where they could have called a penalty on a fumble or an interception or whatever, and they don't. They just rule whether it's a fumble or not fumble. And even Randy Ambrosian, if my phone wasn't dead, I would have the quote where it was in 2021 or whenever they last updated the rules for the command center was that they would not be inserting themselves to call penalties that were not called on the field. And it's actually in the rule book, it's a line that says you're not supposed to call penalties unless they directly lead to a turnover, which as soon as Crum got hit in the legs there, he didn't drop the ball immediately. He didn't drop the ball until like 2 other Rider players hit him. So that was not a direct cause for the fumble. And I actually just wish they would have called it a sack, because then they couldn't have, because there was no immediate grab of the ball. Like in Montreal, how they wouldn't give Montreal the ball because it wasn't immediate. This game wouldn't have been immediate either. Well, so
that was ridiculous.
Yeah, but so is this. So is this. Like, I get in both of these circumstances, to the letter of the law, I guess it's okay. I guess it's right. But in both of these circumstances, common sense should prevail.
Well, let me say, I don't think that... I feel bad for defenders. Like, no matter what they do, like, I don't think it's fair that they're allowed to be cut blocked in the first place anymore. Like,
no,
these poor guys,
absolutely not.
They're barely allowed to hit anybody. And if they do it wrong, they get called. If they roll the wrong way, they get called. If they get cut blocked and lose control, they get called. It's crazy. So I turned the game off when
You're not alone. A lot of people did.
So then I get a message like, I don't know, 20 minutes later, Morgan's a friend of the show. And he goes, you guys got screwed. I'm like, what are you talking about? They won. And he goes, oh. The command center came down and called this thing roughing the passer. So we also got an interesting email here, and I want to try to make sure maybe we can get him on the show. But it's from somebody that was an amateur football ref for 20 years, lives in Calgary right now. And he was actually a part of the replay crew at McMahon Stadium. And the last game that he was a part of the replay crew was the 13th Man Grey Cup in Calgary. He's got a lot to explain, but he's willing to come on the show. And I do think that we're going to try to make this happen. But he says in the Sask-Ottawa game that was not pass interference on Bain, and it wasn't roughing the passer on Crum either. He says he's got a partial inside view of this world and worked in replay for 5 years with the league, so he can offer at least a little insight into this since the league says zero. I do think this would actually be a valuable conversation, so we'll get him on there. But I guess it's just the bigger conversation. I thought that earlier in the season, the officiating was doing very well. They were kind of letting them play. And then it feels like in the last few weeks, the wheels just fell off. I mean, there's that blatant fumble, non-fumble in last week's Hamilton Montreal game. I mean, it didn't affect the end of that game, but it did affect the end of this game when we all kind of thought the game was over. And maybe it is poetic justice that this game ends in a tie because of all the mistakes, the interceptions, the fumbles, the blocked field goals, and the command center all in once. But what do we do about this? And like I know that they're probably going to say there's going to be a review in the offseason on how we improve this. But in the middle of the season, that was just garbage.
It's Monday. I get it's only Monday when we record this, but they still haven't said anything about it, and this happened on Thursday. It's ridiculous. Earlier in the game, there was a play where I think a lot of fans, and not just Rider fans, thought that they got a bad spot on a 3rd and 1, where it should have been like 3rd and inches. When it was at they spotted it at 3rd and 1. So if you're supposed to fix. If the command center is there to fix obvious errors, why wasn't that fixed? That would have taken them 10 seconds to be like, hey, buzz down and be like, nope, you guys spotted the ball wrong. So I think that's what frustrates me as a fan more is there's supposedly an outline as to when and when not the command center is supposed to interject. And it just seems that this year there's times when they will take forever on multiple plays in a row just to make sure that the clock is right or that like the ball is set properly. But when it comes to actual plays where it matters what the spot of the ball is, they do diddly squat. So it just doesn't make sense. And if Bob Dice would have had a challenge flag left, and if he would have been able to throw the challenge flag just like Corey Mace did to say like, hey, that was roughing the passer, I think I would be a lot more okay with them saying it was roughing the passer, because technically I guess it was. But it just seems to me like in this circumstance, the command center went into business for themselves to fish to find another thing just so that they could keep the game going. Just so that they could keep, and I hate to say this, but just so that they could keep an Eastern team, give them another chance to either tie or win the game. And I think
Ottawa has sucked for so long. I don't think that's and like Edmonton has sucked for so long.
I know, but I'm not.
The officials couldn't help them if they wanted to. I'm trying to find where Dice challenged earlier, and I can't find it on the stat sheet. But
Well, I thought it was the game. It was the play right before that. I know he threw his, like they said that he didn't get his shot. And he chucked his flag like away from him. So
that one actually
fairly,
surprised me because we've seen some greasy PIs lately too.
yeah, but like, and I guess correct me if I'm wrong. Like we've had that happen just on this show here, where the lovely gentleman from EA has informed us. But
Yeah.
it just I don't know, man. It took a fun game. Well, it wasn't really a fun game, but it just took the sails out of, like, I don't think any team wants to win that way. I don't think any team wants to lose that way. Like the fact that the coaches were riding down in the elevator down to field level because the game was over. Dustin Crum was in the locker room.
Wow.
Like, and so that tells you how long it actually took for them to do this stupid review, too. It was supposed to be only 60 seconds when it was first introduced. If you can't figure it out in 60 seconds, call on the field stands. So they need to fine-tune it. They need to pay people to actually be in charge. They need to, like, for full-time, not these part-time guys who just fly to Toronto on the weekend to do it. Like, why is retired ex-cop Al Bradbury, just his retirement job, going to screw around in a command center? And I know it was Valesi this game, but still, like, Valesi's the guy who got caught on a hot mic saying the F the Riders before. And so now that's a conspiracy theory right there. He's already said F the Riders before.
Yeah,
So
well, they're led by Chris
blurring.
Jones. I think I would say the same thing.
Yeah, I know.
Like, I don't know. They took the black and white thing or the gray area out by saying, anytime the quarterbacks hit below the knee or whatever. But then when you make it that black and white, stupid stuff like this happens. And yeah,
I'm here for player safety. I'm
Yeah.
here for not having quarterbacks get their legs cut out.
yeah.
But when an accident happens and you're going to take away a win from a team because a player had no control over his body and he hit the quarterback low, and then we can move on because this is pissing me off. The fact that they reviewed for so long and they couldn't even call the penalty on the right player.
Oh, yeah, that's brutal.
Give me a
That's brutal.
break. Like, anyway, let's go on to the next game.
I mean, at least it's week 10 and not the Grey Cup.
Yeah.
Let's get this figured out by November. This is why they say the season doesn't start until after Labor Day, because hopefully we forget about this in a few weeks. But I have a feeling that this will not be forgotten about. But the Riders, Shea Patterson threw 3 interceptions, 2 touchdowns, 299 yards, 30 completions on 49 attempts. They couldn't run the ball. 12 carries for 23 yards from Frankie Hickson. Drew Brown goes 6 of 9 before exiting the game. And then Dustin Crum comes in 21 of 32 for 211 yards and an interception there. He added 72 yards on the ground and a touchdown. The leading receiver for the Red Blacks was Dominic Rhymes, 5 catches, 72 yards. Sean Bain was 8 catches, 90 yards. And I'll just say this. Hey, Dante Myers made quite the statement to stay in the starting lineup for the Riders. 8 catches, 101 yards. He's got some serious speed, so that's a positive.
Yeah, and he looks like he's 16 too. When they did that interview, I was like, "There's no way." But no, and actually, he impressed enough that at practice today, he was still in the starting lineup, and that was even with Keyshawn Johnson back.
Interesting.
So it looks like a Joe is out of the starting lineup.
Oh, well, that's sad.
Yeah.
Let's go to Toronto here, where the Argos beat the Stampeders 39-25. It was actually quite the, I think, entertaining game right from the start here. And Nick Arbuckle ended up getting the start for the Toronto Argonauts. So there's a lot of people familiar with each other here. Dinwiddie coming from Calgary. Same with Arbuckle coming from Calgary. And Arbuckle probably went to Toronto because he's familiar with Dinwiddie and that system in Calgary. And it started off with the Argos starting very well. A touchdown all the way down the field. Mackay Polk getting that touchdown. They were on the board. It was 7-1 Toronto early on in this game. But then Calgary answered back. And then it's 8-7 for Calgary. Jake Maier at times looked really, really good in this game and looked like he was going to outplay Nick Arbuckle in this game. But then things kind of fall off the wheels later in the second half here. It doesn't help when Rene Paredes ends up missing his first kick of the season. Like Mr. Reliable for the Stamps.
What a shame.
What a shame for him. And in the second quarter, Nick Arbuckle actually gets picked off by Demario Houston. The very next drive, the Stamps answer by making them pay for that interception, and they score a touchdown. Peyton Logan gets the rushing touchdown there, but we do have the game breaker, and his name is Janarian Grant, who in the third quarter takes one all the way to the house. This guy, he's on a roll, and I don't know, Winnipeg's kind of looking silly for letting him go.
100%. Like he's the premier back right now in the league, and like I think he's averaging a touchdown every 4-point-something games.
Yeah.
Like it's unreal. And I know he had the game like 3 in a row, which that'll definitely help for the average there, but he is a danger to take the ball any single time he touches the ball. Like it's incredible, and he even has those dreads that people can grab onto, and they're not like it's remarkable. And thank God he doesn't play at Mosaic again this year.
He does well there. He does very well there. So that was in the third quarter, but the fourth starts with the Stampeders driving all the way down the field, taking a 22-21 lead, and that's where it kind of falls off the rails for the Stamps, because we see a 3rd and 1, and the second half is really when the Argo defense really stepped up. 3rd and 1, Tommy Stevens, you kind of think that's automatic, but that ends up in a 6-yard loss. Toronto ends up kicking a field goal after that, but that was a drive right after that Deshaun Amos picked off Jake Maier and took it to the house. So look at that. You throw an interception for a touchdown. The next drive, you turn it over on downs. Toronto kicks a field goal. It all fell off the rails in the fourth quarter for the Stamps.
Yeah, it's like they just realized that they weren't playing at McMahon, because up until that time they were actually playing good. And yeah, they're just so streaky. They're so Jekyll and Hyde. Like I just don't know where to put my finger on them. Like they can be really good and they can be really bad. Which I guess you could pretty much say for every team other than Montreal this year, which is interesting. But
it's true.
Like I don't know what more they could, like when they were throwing the ball short, they were having success, except for when Amos picked it off and he read that like a children's book. He was all over it. And they did even have a couple deep passes that worked too, which usually like they've been having issues with. But I don't know, man. It's
just
it's
the
baffling.
timing of those mistakes, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, like and usually, I still consider Dave Dickinson a good coach. I think their coaching staff is really good, and usually the teams with the really good coaching staffs don't let those mistakes happen at the key times. And so it's interesting, and I just wonder if still this is just too much on Dave's plate with being the GM too, and I know Huffnagel was able to do that for a while, and then he wasn't able to. So I'm just wondering if maybe we're going to start seeing that plan that we've been hearing about with Dickinson just going upstairs sooner than later.
It's also a different dynamic, like the relationships that GMs have with players versus coaches with players, completely different. And when it's one guy, that probably does create some interesting dynamics in a locker room. Jake Maier, 33 of 45, 373 yards and a touchdown, but the critical interception. So I guess he technically did throw for 2 touchdowns. Good job, Jake. Peyton Logan has 11
touchdowns.
11 carries and 61 yards. So he had a touchdown there. The leading receiver for the Stamps, Reggie Bagleton, 8 catches, 13 targets, 104 yards. If we look at Toronto, I mean, Nick Arbuckle, I guess when he's on the field, compared to what we've seen from Cam Dukes, they're able to move the ball in like chunks at a time. When Dukes was on there, it was more dink and dunk and more of the short plays. Now, Arbuckle, he didn't have the best game. 18 to 26, a touchdown and a pick. He threw for 181 yards, but it did feel like the deep pass or the longer play was more in play, if that makes sense with him on the field.
When you have all 3 faces of your team scoring touchdowns, you don't have to have the perfect game and able to win, because there's not going to be a lot of teams that score a touchdown on defense, score a touchdown on a return, that aren't going to win that game. You know what I mean? Like, if you're doing that, then it's you pretty much got in the bag. So it was probably one of his better games since leaving Calgary. I think we could probably say that.
Well, and Toronto's so good at that, like scoring with all 3 phases. That's what they've been good at for years, really. The Javon Leak goes into Janarian Grant, and their special teams doesn't miss a beat at all there. Kadeem Carey has 13 carries, 89 yards, and a touchdown there. The leading receiver for the Argos was actually Mackay Polk, 4 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown. But hey, I didn't mention that Jake Maier also lost a fumble at the end of the game as well. He kind of got out of his comfort zone, became a ball carrier. Arimolade made him pay and made him turn the ball over. So that was a costly moment for the Stampeders as well. And that's what that Argo defense does. And they make you pay for any little mistake. Robert Priester had 6 tackles, a sack, a knockdown. What else did the defense do? Yeah, you mentioned Deshaun Amos. Jonathan Jones had 5 tackles. Sopik had 7 tackles. And then as far as sacks go, Arimolade, I mentioned Priester, and Ralph Hawley, the big one on the 3rd down on Tommy Stevens. So the Argos, they're just a complete team, and now the conversation becomes, as they go to bye week, I didn't mention that Jeremiah Masoli is going to return for the Red Blacks. He's going to be starting against Calgary this week at McMahon Stadium. That's certainly interesting. But as the Argos are on bye, the league has initiated they're talking about their review in regards to Chad Kelly. I think they do have until the end of the bye week to let the Argos know whether he'll be reinstated with the team or not. At this point, I don't know if he'll be starting against the Roughriders on August 22nd. That's a bit of a short week. I mean, they'll be on bye, so they'll be able to, I guess, return to practice a little bit earlier, but he might be starting against the Riders. He might not. At this point, I have no clue.
Yeah, we don't know because the league was extremely vague with that statement, which I guess I understand. But I love that they can come out with a statement like that, and they can't. They just have actual statements about what's actually happening in the league. But that's cool. Yeah, like I see some people online that are thinking that with this statement, it means that he's not going to get reinstated. But from what I think it was Naylor, he said that what he's heard is that Chad's completed everything. I actually used his name. That he's completed everything, and that as far as he's aware, that all the steps or the hurdles that needed to be completed have been. But I think hopefully what they're reviewing is like everything, because we've seen that he's tweeting stupid stuff, and just I don't know if that can stay, or if that can say that his mental state is changed at all, if he's tweeting a bunch of dumb stuff. But free speech and all that crap, so I don't know. But
I guess that's a question for his teammates, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, and that's the thing, because if you're basically calling out your team, your fellow quarterback room's play, like how are you going to walk back into that room and be like, "Hey guys, I'm your leader"? Like, but honestly, I'm just sick of talking about it. I just want it to be over with, and when he's back, we'll talk about it again, and then hopefully, I guess he's learned and doesn't do anything again. But I guess that's all we can hope, because I don't know. I don't know. I'm just tired of talking about him.
The Saturday game ended up being the Montreal Alouettes beating the Hamilton Tiger Cats 33-23. This game doesn't come without its share of, I guess, drama as well. You could tell right from the get-go that the Ticats offense was really struggling with the crowd noise in Montreal, and that clearly goes without saying in this one. Right on the first play from scrimmage, Luther Hakanavanu ends up taking an offside penalty, and then the next play, Bo completes a pass to James Tuck, and I guess maybe this is more poetic justice from the football gods, because he fumbles it, and Darnell Sankey, he forced the fumble. Avery Ellis recovers the fumble, and this one stayed on the board, unlike the previous instance between the Ticats and the Alouettes. So the Owls take a 3-0 lead off a field goal there, and then Hamilton gets the ball again. You had time to figure it out. They take a time count penalty on their first play. Like, can't you have the play figured out before you step onto the field? So a few plays later, Bo ends up throwing a pretty bad interception to Darnell Sankey, who, wow, he's forced 2 turnovers in Hamilton's first 2 possessions. And after that, actually, Montreal could have made this a whole lot worse for the Ticats. They weren't able to take advantage of those early bluffs, really. And this is not going to get talked about, but Joseph Zima with maybe the punt of the year. When the ball is sailing over his head, he bats it down with one hand, but no pressure from the Ticats at all. He gets time to get the punt off. Well, props to Zima for that punt. But the big story is that on the ensuing possession for the Ticats, Taylor Powell comes in, takes over at quarterback. What did you think of the move, man?
I mean, I get it, kind of. You need to shake things up, but that's a pretty short leash for the guy who I think is would either be first or second right now in who the MOP of the East would be. Like, I'm pretty sure it's him, and depending on how hurt Jalen Philpott is. those are probably the only two guys in the East that I would probably think right now would be the most outstanding player nominees.
Well, let's talk about and compare the different situations here, because was McLeod Bethel Thompson the second most successful quarterback in the West behind Vernon Adams Jr.?
You could make that argument, yeah.
You could,
but Bo's at least won. Bo's won 2 games,
right? He did win the games,
and
so everybody was rallying for Trey Ford to get in, and then for Bo, well, and Bo's 2 wins came against Edmonton. Nobody's been really rallying for Taylor Powell to get in. So I just say both veteran quarterbacks are putting up numbers, just not winning games, right?
Yeah.
And then poor Taylor Powell comes in. The first snap goes 3 feet over his head, and they have to take a safety. And then Montreal kicks a field goal. So it could have been 21-0, but it was only 8-0 at the end of the first.
Well, for sure. And I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't think Hamilton's issues right now are Bo. However, it seems that their coaching staff has decided that if we judge by what Bo posted on Instagram yesterday, where it was a picture of his 2 lovely daughters having a lemonade stand and said, I can't remember the exact quote, but basically, when you lose your job, this is your new job, kind of thing. So he's insinuating that he is no longer the starting quarterback.
Well, it's already been announced that Taylor Powell will be starting against the Bombers on Friday.
Yeah. And so that's fine. That makes it seem like this is for the rest of the year, though.
Right.
I just wanted to. I did a quick little poll on our Twitter today, asking Hamilton fans who they thought if they thought Bo Levi Mitchell was the real problem right now. We had 100 votes. 10% said Bo, 37% said it's the defense, and 53% of it said it was the coaching. So, yeah, I don't know. I think just like a fair point with Edmonton and McLeod Bethel Thompson, Hamilton's been scoring enough points to win. Their defense hasn't been stopping, and I think there has been a lot of coaching errors. And I guess it's up to basically, I think Scott's putting his job on the line here, because if you're gonna go away from your starting quarterback when he's actually putting up numbers like this, and you're gonna go to Taylor Powell, who let's be honest, it looks like he has a bright future in this league. He played well last year when Bo was hurt, and he played actually pretty well after he got his settled into this game, I would say. Yeah. So I guess it's his team now, and this is the second time in recent memory that Bo's gone through this, and so I kind of feel bad for him. Man, 10 years ago, I would have imagined myself saying those words. I feel bad for Bo Levi. I don't know. I would be kidnapped. But I do feel bad for him. But, football's a business, and so I guess if the wins aren't stacking up, then you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah, and Montreal's doing this with, I guess, started the season as the third stringer, right? Davis Alexander, and clearly has made Charleston Rambo into a star. He was the number 1 fantasy receiver. This week he has 2 touchdowns, and he was the big reason why the Owls went up 15-0 in this game. So the hole that the Ticats dug themselves, it was pretty tough to get out of by the time, like you say, Taylor Powell got settled into this game. And let's look at Taylor Powell's stat line here, where he goes 30 of 38, 319 yards, and 2 touchdowns. So a really good performance from him. Now, I don't know if this is something that you've really noticed, but I think a lot of teams, they're reluctant to continually take what the defense is giving them, and they'll push the ball downfield and take risks, and that'll end drives. But at the same time, if you're the defense, if you keep everything in front of you and you just make sure that it's short gains, and bank on the offense eventually making a mistake, that seems to be a recipe for success. So the Alouettes get a pretty good lead, and then the Ticats are actually able to sustain some drives. They had some really long drives, but when you allow teams to have these long drives when you're leading in the game, it just ends up being the clock is on your side. So the Ticats were able to make plays and score points, but the drives were just so long that if it was a 120-minute game, they might have been able to come back on the Owls. But I think the Owls were okay with them eating up all that clock on those long drives.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I would argue that that's kind of what Corey Mace has been doing in Saskatchewan, where he's been, because a lot of teams have been getting long drives and yards, and if the offense was there to actually spell some of that, then it might have been working out better for them during this past little stretch here. But earlier on in the season, they were doing that. They were bending but not breaking, and then when it came down to the teams getting into the red zone or close to it, it was making them settle for field goals or turnovers, like you say. So yeah, I think that's actually a good recipe for success, because when you're losing and you're not only just facing the team, you're also facing the clock. That's just such a burden to try to get out of.
Yeah, that's tough. Like when you're having drives that last 7.5 minutes and you're trailing, it better end in a touchdown. And the Ticats, they had a 13-play, 68-yard drive that ate 7.5 minutes off the clock, but it ended in 3. And then the very next drive from the Alouettes, they end up scoring a touchdown. Furvius ends up having a 48-yard reception. Dominic Davis comes out of retirement, gets another rushing touchdown here. So when you're eating half a quarter and then you score 3, I mean, I guess that's good if you're doing that early in the game, especially on the road. But when you're trailing, I think the Alouette defense was okay with them kind of wasting all that time. But Taylor Powell had a good game in this one, and I think last year he proved that, hey, he can be a very capable quarterback in the CFL. And, you know, working with Bo, even last year when Bo was on the sideline, this year in training camp, and allowing Powell to see the game slow down even more a little bit for him, I don't think it's the worst move from the Ticats. But again, much like McLeod, who the last couple games when he started for Edmonton were not good. Let's be clear there. But also part of his job is to be able to command the offense. And if they're struggling and taking offsides and time counts, he kind of wears that early in the game. And it's not like the Alouettes crowd got quieter as the game went on, but Powell somehow, I don't know what it was able to be a part of that offense settling down as the game went on. But when you got veteran receivers, I know Dunbar scored a touchdown, but he had a pretty bad drop in this one right off his chest. But he ended up having 63 yards. Shamar Bridges, 8 catches, 103 yards. Tim White had 50 yards. James Butler, 40 yards rushing, 27 yards receiving. And then, for the Alouettes, Charleston Rambo, 6 catches, 124 yards, 2 touchdowns there. And Davis Alexander, 17-24, 247 yards, 2 touchdowns. The big stat line is the goose egg under the INTs. That's big, especially when he's considered your third stringer. Now your starter, not turning the ball over. That's good.
Oh, for sure. And he might continue that this week against the Riders. We don't know. We don't know if Cody will be ready to go or not. But the last thing I just want to say about Hamilton is, just so everyone's clear, having a good offense isn't going to just do it. So they changed the quarterback, and they got a little spark there, as did Edmonton when they put in Trey Ford, to be honest. But if you're not going to make changes on the defense, and if you're not going to make changes on the special teams, and you're not going to make changes on other aspects, then you can't expect different results than what you've already got.
Yeah, you know what? I can be guilty of skimming over the special teams, but James Letcher Jr., he had 108 kick return yards on 3 returns, including a 57-yarder. So that big return, that will take the wind out of many sails on your team, for sure. I mentioned Trey Ford, those Edmonton Elks getting a 33-16 win over the BC Lions. Early on, I thought that Edmonton was going to struggle here. Jake Dolegala getting the start for the BC Lions, with Vernon Adams Jr. missing this one. And BC was running the ball with William Stanback. He ended up having his biggest, I think, 87 yards rushing in this one, his biggest game of the year. But then they quit it. And Edmonton couldn't stop. I'd say if the defense can't stop it, keep going with it until they can't.
Yeah, and that's what we discussed last show, is saying that the Lions were going to have to get the ground game established, because we're not sure if Dolegala can do it. And I don't think he had a terrible game, but I don't think he had a great game. He had a lot of overthrows. He had some key drops too, which, when you have your backup quarterback in there and you have, catches that are going to be first downs and you drop them, that's just brutal. So that didn't help. But the BC, and even Rick Campbell admitted after the game, or if it was at halftime, I'm not sure, but they're trending in the exact wrong way that they need to be right now. They are not a good team. Just a few weeks ago, I think we were saying that, it was BC and Montreal and everyone else, and we certainly cannot include BC anymore. I know VA got hurt, and that's a big deal, but they've also gotten some really big weapons back in the past few weeks too, which you would think would open some things up. But also, with Keon Hatcher coming back, with the other receiver, I can't remember his name right now, Justin McInnes's production has dropped, and he hasn't been doing it, and he hasn't even been getting as many targets that he's used to getting. So BC needs to figure it out, and they need to figure it out pretty quickly here. I know Vernon Adams is only week to week, but they can't, this was their 3rd loss in a row. They can't keep losing. If they got to keep pace with Saskatchewan, because Saskatchewan's probably going to get Trevor Harris back this week, if not this week, for sure next week. And looks like Thurman's going to be back too. So, Saskatchewan can put the gas down here and try to take a stranglehold of first if BC isn't able to, start getting back into it.
William Stanback had 13 carries, and just by a quick glance, it looked like 6 or 7 of them were on the first 2 possessions. Then the rest of the game, they completely got away with that. There were some clear mistakes by the Lions made, because they got up in this game. But then they let Edmonton come back with, I think it was 18 unanswered points. It was 10-1 for the Lions. And then the Elks get going. Trey Ford hits Tevin Jones, which, by the way, what a resurgence he's had. I can't believe now it's like, why wasn't this guy on a week 1 roster? And then Javon Leake continues to score points. But then Edmonton brings it to 10-8. The next drive, it's 3rd and 5 on Edmonton's 40-yard line. BC goes for it. They needed 5 yards, but they tried to gain 40 with Keon Hatcher. And I rewatched that play. Alex Hollins was right at the first down marker with nobody around him. and instead they went deep. That was an interesting decision by quarterback and coach, Sheldon.
Terrible decision. Like, I don't know. Like, we were texting during the game, and you mentioned that maybe you thought that they didn't want to risk Shaun White's field goal record.
There was
here,
a little bit of wind. I didn't think it was detrimental, but yeah.
But it would have been a 47-yard field goal, and Shaun White kicks those in his sleep. So, like, if you were trying to catch the Elks off guard by throwing it deep on a 3rd and 5, I guess congratulations, but your receiver wasn't anywhere near the ball, and Jake just threw it too far. But when you're gambling, you have to make it a smart gamble. And like you said, Hollins is right there. They would have got the ball, keep your drive going. But mistakes like that can lead to you losing, just a compounding of errors on top of another.
Yeah, and what a change of momentum, because on the very next drive, BC takes a pass interference penalty in their own end zone. Dakota Prukop runs it in, and the Elks take the lead there. And they had a 19-10 lead going into the half. And we'll have to mention, at the end of the second quarter, Trey Ford ends up getting hurt. Now, I felt kind of silly going back and watching it, because in the stands it did look like the defender that ended up kind of grabbing or slapping his shoulder pad. It looked like he slapped Trey in the head. So a lot of us in the stands did think it was a face mask or a roughing the passer on that. But I actually do think that they got that review correct.
Because he becomes a ball character. He becomes a ball carrier. He's not a quarterback. So even if there's a slight hit of the head, that's not a penalty there. But yeah, the guy did get the shoulder pad first. So definitely a clean hit there. Yeah,
but it poor Elks fans at halftime, they're like, why can't we have anything nice? For their credit, McLeod Bethel Thompson came in, and look, he played great. There was the one interception in the end zone. But Deontay Evans makes the interception of the year. Like, that was crazy. Geno Lewis, it's just over his fingertips, and Evans gets 1 foot down. What a play that was.
Him being able to get that foot down while stretching up to get that ball around 2 other Elk players, it's just, incredible. Like you can't fault McLeod Bethel Thompson with that. You can't even fault Geno. It's just a hell of a play by a defender.
Now, I've said the wheels fell off when BC went for it in 3rd and 5 and messed that up. But the wheels fell off again, because the Lions get to within, I guess, 3. And then it's 22-16 Edmonton. And then, oh man, BC ends it. It's 3rd and 8. And they take a contacting the kicker penalty. That drive continues. It ends in a Rankin touchdown. The Elks take a 28-16 lead, and the game's essentially over at that point. That contacting the kicker penalty was brutal. The Elks go 100 yards on 13 plays in 7 minutes and 48 seconds. Their defense was gassed.
Yeah, it's just a funny thing that anybody who has College Football 25 will understand. In that game, there's always, like, you have to be on, like, punt safe, or else there's going to be a roughing the kicker penalty when it comes to, like, field goals and stuff. Right. So I kind of, in my playing of the trial that I'm now finished, but I kind of felt I've been very upset at my controller a few times when that's happened, so I could feel the Lions fans' pain there. But yeah, you can't, there's such a fine line between going to block the kick, but you have to have control of your body, and you know that the kicker is going to be there, you know that he's going to keep his leg up, you know he's looking for you to hit him, and you can't even come close. So like, you could tell he felt really bad, and he was really upset with him. They were showing quite a few close-ups of him on the sideline there, and you feel for it, but you know what, you got to learn from it and not do it again.
Yeah, so Trey Ford exits the game. He was 6 of 6 for 96 yards at that point. McLeod Bethel Thompson, 14 of 18, 187 yards, a touchdown, and a pick. Javon Leake, 21 carries for 97 yards. So the Elks destroyed the Lions in time of possession. They had the ball for almost 35 minutes. And Justin Rankin himself added 77 yards rushing, including a 45-yarder. The leading receiver for the Elks was Tevin Jones, 6 catches on 6 targets, 123 yards here. Tevin Jones, Sheldon, I'm going to quickly pull this up, has caught every one of his targets in 2024. This is crazy.
If they would have played Trey Ford and Tevin Jones start, they'd be undefeated. Come on.
Exactly. He goes, okay, so far, he's 9 catches, 9 targets, 246 yards, and 2 touchdowns. I think we have a Western MOP, Sheldon.
Very well could be. Yes.
Okay, so we've talked about, some MOPs, and out of the West, now that Vernon Adams is hurt, I don't know. I honestly think that at this point, Roland Milligan might be the nominee for Saskatchewan's MOP, and obviously defensive player. I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility.
Yeah, I think McInnes would have had an inside track, but he's had just 2, not great games in a row, and so that's gonna take, like, if this was like the Heisman watch or something, like, his stock would have fallen quite a few places. But yeah, Roland Milligan is. I think you could probably say he's the best defensive player in the league right now. I think he's playing at an unreal level, and so I just don't want to jinx him at all. So I'm hitting every single piece of wood I can find here. But I think he could be the first. He might be to have a chance here to be the first player since Javon Johnson to win MOP as a defensive player.
Well, I think Elamimian did it, if I remember correctly.
Was that after Johnson?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, my bad. Wait, didn't Enoch win it too, or was that just most ascending Canadian?
I don't know.
Yeah, no, that was just...
Now
who knows? I'm talking on my butt. I thought I read the Javon Johnson thing, so yeah, my bad.
I thought Solly did it, but I'm sure we'll get
Solly for sure did it, yeah. But I just don't know when it was.
I think it definitely was after Johnson.
Cool.
McInnes did have 54 yards. He was their second leading receiver. He had 3 catches on 3 targets. Keon Hatcher was the leading receiver, 4 catches, 62 yards. Jake Dolegala, 14 of 23, 146 yards in this one. As for the Elks receivers, Curly Gittens Jr., 6 of 6 for 70 yards in this one. But I gotta mention Geno Lewis, man. 77, I think, games in a row with a catch. He gets 1 target. He was pretty upset after the game. I get it. And this is crazy, by the way. Edmonton has won the season series with BC because BC only beat Edmonton by 3 the last time these teams played. But if I look back at that last game as well, Geno Lewis had 1 catch for 6 yards. And watching this game from the stands, Gary Peters was on Geno all game long, and Gary was chirping him. Sometimes Geno would engage. Sometimes he would just run away. But I don't know if they're avoiding the Peters and Geno matchup. And I know they've only got 2 downs to play with. It's a 3-down game. I think Geno's a guy that at least once a quarter, let him try to win those battles. They're not even looking that way.
No, and especially when a guy has an active streak like that, like us being Rider fans, we remember, Don Narcisse and all the game, like the streak that he had. And there was some games where it would come down to the last play of the game and they would just hit him on an out or whatever. But like when you like I get it, and I'm sure Gino would probably rather win. Like, well, you say he was upset, but I'm sure he's a team first guy and he wants to win. But when you like sometimes those like accolades that you can have of games in a row with a catch when there's only 18 games in a season, and so it's tough to get that number up there. And so you would think that maybe they would go to him early to try to get that out of the way, and that he can then think about other stuff than just getting that one catch. But it's rough because you never want to see a player lose a streak like that. Like we don't want. I know I laugh and say that's a shame that Rene Paredes missed just because I don't like the Stamps, but you don't want to see him miss when he's got a nice streak going. I don't want to see Sean White miss. Like I like history. I like records. So I hate seeing that. And Gino he's still one of the best receivers in the league, and whether or not he's going up against their best coverage guy, like he calls it the 90-10 for a reason. That pick that BC got in the end zone there, that was the 10 of the 90-10, right? And if that's the only time you're going to go to him that whole game, that's brutal.
Well, and you look in the NFL, like every team's got these hot shot receivers that they start pouting. And I'm not saying Gino's pouting, but the offense is many times built around this one dominant receiver. CFL offenses aren't built that way. They'll look at 4 or 5 different receivers, but I think Edmonton would benefit by getting Gino involved early and often and get him on a roll. I don't understand. Look, you're paying him $300K. Let him earn that money. They're not even like we saw when he came into the game, when Trey came into the game, not the game he started, but when he came and scored 3 TDs in 10 minutes against the Ticats. They get Gino the ball. The guy's so hard to tackle. He's a physical force, but if the ball's not in his hands, what's he gonna do? And one target. I know we're nitpicking a win for Edmonton, but that's just not good enough, I don't think. But now the Lions are limping here, man. Losing against Edmonton, I know, without Vernon Adams Jr., but they got shut out by the Bombers. That was after a bye. Before the bye, they lost by a point to the Stamps. So now the Lions are 5-4 in second place in the West. The Riders.
Sorry, 3 key Western losses in a row.
Western opponents. The Lions are 2-3 inside their division, and if you want to get that West final at your stadium, you have to play better against your division. So Saskatchewan is first in the West at 5-3-1. Calgary is 4-5 at third place right now, with the Bombers at 3-6. So obviously every single game matters, and every single game down the stretch is going to matter here. But now BC is home to the Bombers off the bye. The Lions got to figure it out in a hurry. And this game is interesting, I think. Edmonton going to Hamilton. Taylor Powell getting the start. Is Trey Ford going to be healthy or not? That's intriguing for sure. The Riders hosting the Alouettes on Friday. Possibly Trevor Harris back for the Saskatchewan Roughriders. We'll see what that does for them. And then the Calgary Stampeders home to Ottawa on Thursday. Now, Ottawa 1-2 on the road, while the Stamps are undefeated in McMahon Stadium so far. So we'll see if that trend continues. That's week 11 on the way in the Canadian Football League. Sheldon, let's go over quickly. I'll load them up too. Your power rankings following week 10 of the season.
Well, we have a new number 1 at the top, which is we didn't think that was going to happen.
Somebody's taking out the Alouettes? What?
Yeah, the number 1 is the command center because they think they have all the power in the world. So they are number 1 this week.
It's like the anonymous Raw general manager.
Yeah. I hate them just about as much as that, yeah. And I quote, so at number 2, but really number 1, we have Montreal, Ottawa, Sask, Edmonton. So I moved Edmonton up quite a bit just because, they're on a roll. They were able to win with McLeod Bethel-Thompson, so that kind of had a little bit more in there. It wasn't just a Trey Ford thing. So, yeah, they went up because they're trending up. Winnipeg stayed the same at 5, I guess would be on the bye. Toronto's number 6. BC's all the way down in 7. They're trending down just like their coach said. So they got to see what's going to happen there. And then I have Calgary at 8 just because we don't know what team they are. I guess when they're on the road, they'll be lower. When they're at home, they'll be higher. Right? That's just kind of how it is. And then Hamilton, you're still number 9. Sorry.
Well, that Ticats home game against the Elks, I think that's going to be a fascinating game for this upcoming week of CFL football. I'm Travis Currah. He is Sheldon Jones. You can rate, review, and subscribe to Two and Out on your favorite podcatcher and on YouTube, and you can support the show on Patreon as well. Check out our website, twoandout.ca. We'll talk to you later this week to get you ready for Week 11.
Thanks for listening. Find more great shows like this at CF Pod Network on Twitter.